Hey, what's up, everybody? Pat here, gratefully recovering alcoholic and addict, just like every day. Guys, please don't forget to subscribe, leave the video a like, drop me a comment, and by all means, share it with anybody you think might get something out of it. Other than that, happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. You can see I got my new St. Patty's Day web T-shirt at lunch today. Had some delicious corned beef and cabbage. Actually went in for a second plate. It was really good. And that's the extent of my celebration, guys. You know what? Yeah, and anybody going out tonight, please just be responsible. For me, St. Patrick's Day was, I haven't had a drink in 25 years, and it's probably the last time I celebrated it. But it was a night of debauchery, and I'd end up inevitably blackout drunk, waking up in the morning terrified of what I did the night before. And I'm so glad I don't live that way anymore. And you know what? I thought I was courageous back in those days because, I'd get all drunk and medicated up or numbed up with drugs and I run around like I had no fear while I was absolutely terrified of everything in my life and not progressing because I wouldn't face those fears. And I don't live that way anymore, guys. Being sober is courageous. Being responsible is courageous. Doing the right thing, not knowing what's going to come of it, is courageous. And that's true courage to me today, guys. But we're going to talk about it. We'll get into the reading first. True Courage is the title of the Just for Today NA meditation reading. It's a great reading. True courage. Those who make it through these times show a courage not their own. Before coming to recovery, many of us thought we were brave simply because we had never experienced fear. We had drugged all of our feelings, fear among them, until we had convinced ourselves that we were tough, courageous people who wouldn't crack under any circumstances. But finding our courage in drugs has nothing to do with the way we live our lives today. Clean and in recovery, we are bound to feel frightened at times. When we realize we are feeling frightened, we may think we are cowards. We are afraid to pick up the phone because that person on the other line might not understand. We're afraid to ask someone to sponsor us because they might say no. We're afraid to look for a job. We're afraid to be honest with our friends. But all of these fears are natural and even healthy. What's not healthy is allowing fear to paralyze us. When we permit fear to stop our growth, we will be defeated. True courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the willingness to walk through it. And the affirmation is just for today. I will be courageous today. When I'm afraid, I will do what I need to do in recovery. And, that reading made me happy when I was reading that, guys, because, again, the early days in recovery, my life was fraught with fear. I'm walking into rehab, I was absolutely terrified. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. I didn't know what life like a sober adult was. I didn't know what it was like to be responsible. And honestly, at that point, I didn't know if I hadn't done it because I was incapable of it. I honestly thought at that point I was running out with some undiagnosed mental defect that didn't allow me to live like an adult human being, and that's crazy, right? But again, it's understandable. It's where I was at after 35 years of active addiction. I didn't know which end it was up. So, as paralyzed with fear as I was, I took the next step. In those early days, it was literally one step at a time because I was so afraid of making the wrong move for fear of blowing what I'd caught. And what I'd caught was hope through prayer, meditation, and starting to take action. By listening to people from recovery groups, NA and AA, that would come into rehab, and they had that spark, they had that hope. Well, they shared that hope with me, and that's why we do what we do. We keep what we have by giving it away, right? So I started latching on, and again, as I did the work, I realized that everything about me was wrong, and that was terrifying, because I'm like, well, is it something, again, I talked about it last night's video, did I do irreparable damage to my physical body, because I'm so weak, and I'm having such trouble just getting out of bed? No, it was just still detoxing. Is there some mental defect wrong with me? No, I was medicating myself and not looking at my actions, and then I'm not applying myself in any proper ways. So little by little, I figured this out, and little by little, I started doing these things, and so that's what I do today. It didn't happen overnight, and I don't do anything perfectly. Do not get me wrong, but I do things really, really well today because I've trained myself to do that. For me, when realizing the totality of everything about me was so wrong and I didn't know who I was, I just started looking for it. And I did it by following the program, following the workshops at rehab, and then doing my IOP and being honest when I filled out my intake forms. Because again, for me, I didn't even know how to ask myself the right questions at that point. So I trusted and believed because I was praying and meditating and taking good action that everything God was putting in front of me was something important for me to pay attention to. And it was. And honestly, guys, that's how we should walk through life. Everything in front of us is important because, there's traps at every corner. But regardless, let's not get our point on that. So by paying close attention and believing that everything, because again, when you realize that you know nothing and everything about it's wrong, you have to start looking and trying to figure out, well, does this feel wrong? Does this feel right? So I just was honest for once in my life. And again, in the early days, some of that shakeup can be really upsetting, and you think you're going further down the hump, but you're not. You're slowly making your way back to center. And again, when I was filling out these forms, I know the totality of what I've been through, but I'm explaining it to people, and I wasn't trying to blow everything out of proportion. For once in my life, I realized I needed to know the truth, and so I would just be very honest and to the point when I filled these things out, when I answered surveys and different things. And again, they diagnosed me with severe PTSD and abandonment and this and that, and that scared me a little bit because I'm like, okay, well, am I going to be... honestly, at that point, I thought it'd be years in therapy before I could even walk outside my door again. No, that was, again, my brain trying to scare me into not taking that next step. But I didn't. I was very fearful. I was terrified. But I continued, again, adopted higher power. I trusted that God, who had already shown me signs and synchronicities in my life, specifically tailored so I could see that I was being heard, and I was being protected, and I was being cared for. So, okay, boom. Well, I can be scared. But the only way I can go wrong is if I take my will and do what I usually do. So I'm not going to do that. So I would sit back and just analyze every step. But as fearful as I was, I would take that next step. Guys, going to work and working for a job I knew I had to quit, yet he was a friend. He would, it was tough. That was terrifying. Like, I at that point I was still terrified of conflict just because of I had so many skeletons in my closet from my former life that I avoided conflict at all times. Because again, I looked at that and said, well, usually when conflict comes up, I have warrants out or it drop of a hat, I'd be thrown in jail. So yeah, no wonder I was afraid. I was afraid to ever draw attention to myself. I said, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm doing things right. I got nothing over my shoulder. I don't have to be afraid of that. And again, when it came up that I knew I had to leave that job, I had anxiety all week. But that was good anxiety because it was telling me where I was, couldn't go on. And I was wrestling with it. Well, is there a softer, easier way? Because, that's what we do as addicts. And I realized, no. The more, it literally was like 4 or 5 days of this. And I'm like, I can't do it. I have to quit this job. And I hadn't even considered what was to come next. Because I knew I didn't have to. I knew if I did the right thing, the right things would happen, right? I would find something. And again, at the end of the day, I have certain parameters I have to work within because I'm an addict and I have the record I have. But I also know I'm highly skilled and I'm a hard worker and I'm a good person and I know how to talk to people. So I knew. I had no idea what I was going to do next, but I knew it would happen. I also had the inside track with Doug feeding me work, and I knew it would figure it out. But I was still terrified of that conversation. And you know what, guys? As soon as I took the leap of faith and just said, okay, boom, I have to do it right at this moment because I was irritated in the moment. And I did. I gave my notice. And I was respectable about it. I continued to come to work for the next 2 weeks because I gave a 2-week notice. And I knew there would be some uncomfortable times during that 2 weeks. And there was, to be expected, right? But every time I overcame one, I got that confidence saying, okay, well, I was afraid of this, and it wasn't that big a deal. Like, the world's not going to come to an end because you disagree with somebody. The tree's not going to fall out of the sky and hit you because you stick up for yourself, as long as you're not imposing your will and taking advantage of somebody, and I wasn't. All I was doing was putting my needs first and voicing them openly and honestly. So when I look at that, like, yeah, of course nothing terrible is going to happen, but again, when you're in fear, you don't always think rationally. But again, by doing so, I gave myself confidence. I gave myself experience, good experience. So when the next situation come up, and I can't think of exactly what the next one was, I have to go back and look at my videos for chronological order, but I had the experience of, and the confidence of having taken the last leap of faith and having good things happen. So I think it was, matter of fact, no, I know exactly what happened. Next was the conversation with Doug. Doug's my landlord, my friend, one of my biggest supporters. He had held my apartment, even though I was thousands behind in rent, because I was going to rehab. He had offered to pay for rehab if my insurance wouldn't because he wanted me clean. And again, all he had to do was evict me and throw me away, but he saw good in me. So I said, okay, well, that's somebody I can confide in, right? And all of a sudden, he's letting me use the truck. I come home, and he happens to call from Florida, and he's like, how's the truck? How's this? And I'm like, immediately, I'm like, I got to tell this guy what just happened. So I said, well, and again, fear. I was terrified. Well, what if he takes the truck away? What if... Well, then that's what's meant to happen. And that's the beauty of inviting a higher power into your life and trusting a loving, trusting God and knowing that, yes, things may get shaken up, but when you're doing things right, it's all for the highest good. If something's taken away from you because it's not meant for you, right? If you're doing everything right. If you manipulate, lying, cheating, stealing, then all bets are off, right? But if you're working a real recovery program, you're working a spiritual program, you're being faithful, you're working in alignment, you're being the best version of you, the best person you possibly can, then good things will come. So boom, I had the conversation with Doug, and lo and behold, instead of dropping the hammer on me, he praises me. He's like, I'm so proud of you. I knew you couldn't hang around with those idiots and stay clean. The next day, he tells me that I was so worried about him taking the truck away. Tells me, no, you keep the truck. The next day, he sells it to me. Now I own the truck, right? Starts making phone calls and letting other contractors know that I'm going to start doing side work on my own. Boom, I get so many phone calls. A month later, I register the business. These are all rewards that came because I did what I needed to do in fear. I was terrified. What am I going to do for money? Well, like all the normal feels, guy. We all have. We all want to keep a roof over our head. I'm telling my landlord that I owe money to, that I quit my job, that could have jeopardized that. But no, because I was doing the right, and I was doing it for the right reasons. I wasn't quitting my job because I'm lazy and didn't want to work. I was quitting my job because the guys are doing cocaine and drinking all day right in front of me. Clearly that's not going to work out. And guys, here we are. I'm living a life I never dreamed I'd be able to live. I'm somebody that's respected in the recovery community for work I do because, again, I took the action while I was afraid, and I did good things. I took good action. Not because my brain knew what to do, but because for once in my life, I removed my insecurities, my fears, and my defects from the equation, and I shut up and I listened, and then I took action when I came to a good decision. Every time a opportunity came up, whether it was good or bad, I stopped and looked at it and just had an internal dialogue with myself. Was this something I want to do? Is this something I don't want to do? Well, if I don't know, then what's going to happen? What's the most likely outcome? Is this something I need? Is it something to better myself, or am I doing something to help somebody else out? And if it's one of those three, then okay, we'll do it. If not, then no. Because I need time to stop the momentum and start figuring out how to do good things. And guys, like, very simple, right? Not necessarily easy, and it takes a lot of introspection and a lot of courage, really, to do so, to face your fears, to face your triggers, your history, your insecurities, your defects, and your demons all at the same time, but you do so with a higher power. And the thing of it is, guys, once I started doing this and I started getting good results, it was almost, and again, it was a healthy fear. I knew if I didn't do it to the best of my ability, then I was going to stop the blessings that were just popping up in every way, shape, or form. So I doubled down and said, well, if it's this good now, let me do more good work. And again, that's that reasonable amount of fear. There's a fear that keeps us from walking off of a 6-story building or a 100-story building, or like, that's meant to be there, guys. We're supposed to have some fears, because again, if you have absolutely no fear about stuff, then you have no reason to do the right thing, right? And again, I'm not saying hell and brimfire to God, because I don't believe that for a second. We have free will. But for once in my life, I'm doing good things, and now all of a sudden I have good opportunities. My business is growing. I'm going to the gym regularly, so I'm getting healthy. My family's back in my life. Like, when I start doing the right thing and then being honest about it, so many times, almost all of the best things that have happened to me in this recovery have been a direct result of something I either would have paid no attention to in the past, or just because I voiced what I was actually feeling, what was really going on, and took the proper action, did what I believed to be the best thing for me to do. And again, I made mistakes. I've had to stop and I pivot. And then the beauty of that is I've learned that that's okay too. I didn't have to be perfect all the time. I don't have to have the right answers all the time. But as long as I stop and look at them and do what I think is best at the moment, and if I see that I'm going the wrong way, stop and don't be afraid to say, whoa, I don't have all the answers. I thought this would lead to this, and clearly this is leading somewhere else, so I've got to stop and change right now. Guys, these are things we have to be able to do. Everybody does, not just addicts. Any reasonable, responsible adult doesn't have all the answers, but when we see things that are starting to lead in a direction that you don't necessarily want to go, if you're paying attention, you'll know that, and you'll be able to stop it if you have the courage to do so. The beauty of that is the more you do it, or at least for myself, the more I've done it, the better I'm able, the more I've grown my intuition. I'm able to see a bad situation coming 15 steps before I get into trouble today and head it off at the pass. Doesn't mean I don't make mistakes, but I keep myself from avoiding the big pitfalls. You know, having the courage like that led me to, again, one of the biggest things. I think one of the biggest tests I had for myself in this recovery when I was, it was June, so about 4 to 5 months into my recovery, my appendix burst and I ended up in the emergency room, and I got doctors telling me that they're going to either override or reverse, and again, I don't even know which, because I wouldn't let them get that far, my Sublocade and medicate me because I'm going in for surgery. That was one of the biggest times I felt fear, because again, when I looked at the work I've been doing, subliminal hypnosis and reprogramming, all these things to get my head to look, my brain to look for the good in life and then chase the good. When they told me they were going to administer an opiate into my body, that scared the shit out of me. Because one thing I don't know is what that chemical is going to do. For all I know, they could inject me with God knows what, and all of a sudden the craving, conniving, maniacal monster is back in charge of my thinking, and I'm going to leave that hospital chasing drugs. But I was able to see that from all the work I've done and realize that that's still a good possibility. Because again, I'm not overconfident, and I have that healthy fear today. So I made the best decision I've ever made in my life and said no, repeatedly, over and over and over and over again for the next 12 hours in the hospital until the next morning when I left the hospital, because they kept offering me comfort meds, and I didn't need them. They wouldn't have comforted me. They would have scared the shit out of me. There was no comfort in thinking I was going to get high, because I don't know if I'd be able to stop. So they gave me the courage to say no. And even to doctors when they're like, oh, you don't understand. Have you ever had surgery before? No, I have not. You can see it in my chart. Well, you don't understand. We're going to No, you don't understand. I'm an addict, and once I start taking drugs, I can't stop. So I can either be in a little bit of discomfort. And first of all, I walked in here in a load of pain because my appendix had burst. You're going to remove that from me. Yeah, I'm going to have things manipulating inside my body. It's going to tear muscles. It's going to be uncomfortable. But it can't be worse than the pain I'm in now, and it'll go away if I lay in bed and rest. If you put drugs in my body, I might die when I leave the hospital going to get the next bag of heroin. Right? When you do the work, guys, you see things clearly for what they are. And it gives you the ability to make good decisions. The more you do it, the easier they get. But you got to have the courage to try. You got to have the courage to face your fears, to work your program. And if you do, I promise you, your life will get better. I can't say you'll get the exact day in, day out results that I have, because I feel like I'm walking with a team of angels surrounding me because of all the work I'm doing. But I'm telling you, you will get amazing, miraculous, beautiful results. The deeper you go, the better it'll get. Guys, happy St. Patrick's Day. That's a video for today. Always remember, God loves you. I love you. We'll see you in the next one.